Hey everybody, before we get into the show, I just want to apologize for some of the audio quality that you're about to hear. Greg Zumach sounds terrific during the entire episode. As far as I go, I used my mic, it was plugged in the entire episode, but apparently I actually wasn't plugged in. I was using the computer audio to pick up my voice. So, as you'll find out throughout the entirety of this episode, my voice is a little bit not quite as crisp as it typically is. So, hopefully, you guys still enjoyed the episode. There's a lot of good content still to come. Thank you guys so much for listening and enjoy the show.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the CubsCon Deck podcast presented by NorthsideBound.com. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Greg Zumach. It's the Greg Show again. Greg, how you doing over there, man?
I'm doing fantastic. We just finished a exhilarating CubsCon to kind of follow. I followed from afar, but I know some of the listeners here were there and got all down with the excitement. And yeah, just looking forward to talking a little Cubs prospects here.
Yeah, I was out of town this weekend. I was visiting with some friends, and so I was away from. I was not at CubsCon. I was not even at my phone, kind of following along on Twitter and following along with what was going on. And so I kind of mass consumed the entire Cubs convention all at one time on Sunday night. So that was fun. I watched the prospect video. I watched the pitching video on the Cubs YouTube channel. The kids interviews, which are always like the best. But it was fun. It was fun kind of consuming all that all at one time. Twitter was kind of crazy, but it was definitely fun. I'm glad that people got the chance to enjoy CubsCon again after a few years off, because it always looks like just an electric atmosphere.
Yeah, it really was. Greg, have you been before?
I haven't been before, no.
It's fun. It's been a few years since I've done that. I think I did 2017, which was right after they won, right? Like that was nuts.
Yeah.
The line to like get outside it, not that this is the Cubs convention podcast, right? Like you should probably listen to I think is it the 400 podcast with Crawley. Yeah. Like that guy, he is Cubs convention personified. But yeah, no, like it was a great time. But I just remember they had to split it up into two different hotels effectively. Then they might still do that, but the line to get Kyle Schwarber's autograph after he rose like a phoenix basically from the ashes to almost win the MVP of that series was nuts. KB obviously another one, and no, it was a great time. It's something I'm looking forward to. I got a lot of messages from fans this weekend, and so I really appreciate it. I wasn't able to make it. Hopefully we're able to go sometime in the future. I'd love to take my kids there. But yeah, I'm glad everybody had fun, and I think there was some interesting stuff that came out of it, right? Like these things are going to hype people up. So you have to kind of weigh that with how the context is, but maybe we'll dive into a little bit of that as it relates to prospects and overall methodology. So yeah, it seemed like a really fun weekend for everybody who attended.
Yeah, so we're here as a Cubs prospect podcast, and I mean, like you said, there were plenty of Cubs prospect little tidbits of information at CubsCon that came out. So, like, obviously, if you guys are, I'm not entirely sure when this episode is being posted. I'll admit to you guys that, but you get some context about when we're recording based on this conversation. Yeah, I guess there's several things I want to hit on in this episode today. The first of which, we always got to start at the top. We always got to start with crow-armstrong. And there was word that came out, according to, I think PCA actually dropped this tidbit on a radio show during CubsCon, that he will be in big league spring training. He gets an invite to big league spring training. And I mean, that feels pretty spot on given where he's at in his development and how the Cubs in past years, I mean, all teams do this, but the Cubs have really prioritized getting those top prospects in big league camp, getting them some experience and getting some experience around some big leaguers, not only for like the talent level, but to like pick the brains of some Cubs big leaguers. You know what I mean? So like, what I guess what's your big takeaway from PCA being in big league spring training?
I don't think it changes much. We were getting some messages. I don't know if you got some, Greg. I know a few of us at Northside Bound were like, hey, does this mean he has an outside chance of making the team? Like, no. Very unlikely that, so let's just get that out of the way. But just exactly what Greg was saying, I think it's just really good to have him around the big leaguers. And he is an elite defender. Every publication backs that up. You know, he's certainly more than that, but he gets to hang around literal Gold Glove winning players in the outfield. Like, there is something to be said. Ian Happ started as a guy who wasn't very good defensively at basically any position, right? He kind of started out at second base. They tossed him into the outfield. They moved him around all over the place. You know, hashtag Joe Madden lineups. And he busted his butt to become a Gold Glove winning left fielder. PCA gets to shag balls in the same outfield as Ian Happ. He gets to shag balls in the same outfield as Cody Bellinger, who is also very, very strong as a defensive center fielder. And it also gives him a little bit of an opportunity to get some of the nerves out of the way, because there is a pathway for him making the team late in September with the eye on really getting a full run in 2024. Like, teams are starting to do that. PCAs are going to be at a really good spot that if he hits very well, we're thinking probably Tennessee this year. There was a report out of The Athletic that from Patrick Mooney, they kind of talked a little bit about his projection and where he's going to start. And he posturized Double-A. So, like, yeah, that's possible. So I really like him getting a chance to be in spring training. I don't think he's going to be the last one. I think we're going to hear a lot of guys get brought up to spring training to get their opportunities there.
One of my favorite things around this time frame, right, is finding out what prospects are going to be in big league spring training. I mean, I know of a few guys that I've reached out to and talked to and know that they're going to be their prospects now. They will be in big league spring training. I'm not going to give those names here, but I'm excited about some of the names that I've heard. And that's one of my favorite things about the offseason, you know, I guess leading up to spring training, because we're going to see all of those, like the veteran minor league free agent signings that happened over the offseason. Those guys will all be in big league spring training, obviously, but getting those prospects there is so much fun. And I think a big thing is the Cubs are not having Pete Crow-Armstrong and these other prospects in big league spring training. A guy that has no business, that they don't foresee having an impact in the majors someday. You know, I mean, they can envision a world in which these guys make the big leagues. Pete Crow-Armstrong, I mean, maybe we're talking about later this season in 2023. I mean, I think that it's the conversation about PCA potentially making the big leagues in late 2023 is like, it's cracking me up, dude. It's so funny because it's like people are like, I see one side of the spectrum where people are saying, of course Pete Crow-Armstrong is going to make the big leagues in 2023. Like, no doubt that's going to happen. That's not how I feel at all. I don't think that's the case. I see the other side of things, and people are like, oh, it'd be miraculous if Pete Crow-Armstrong made the big leagues in 2023. That's also not how I view it, right? I think it's somewhere in the middle where it's like, if a guy is a top prospect in Double-A, like it should be not surprising if they make the bigs by the end of the year. Like, he's in the upper levels of the minors. That's not a shocking development. That's not a shocking thing if he makes the big leagues. Now, should we expect that to be like a for sure thing that happens? We should not expect that either. He's in his second full season of minor league baseball. We shouldn't expect it's possible. Shocking, I know. It's possible to be in the middle of that spectrum. And I don't know.
No.
Is that crazy? Is that too crazy to say that?
There is no middle ground. It is one extreme or the other. You have to be on. You can't be in between both ships. No, of course, there's a middle ground. And like, yeah, you know, I apologize for jumping in there because I mostly just wanted to make that quibble, but or quib. But like, it's true. I mean, he could have the most mild, like, you know, tweak an ankle, rounding second base. There's totally nothing major, and, you know, not wishing any ill will on any prospect, of course. You know, and be out for a couple weeks and kind of take a couple weeks to get his groove back and still be the same long-term projection guy and have it be not like, I don't know. I don't mean to call out any fans here because I think everybody should fan, everybody should hope however they want to hope. But there were a lot of things when the offseason was leading up where people were like, if these are the options in center field, why don't you just hand the job to PCA in spring training? And it was like, sir, madam, please don't do that. Please don't set your expectations that high. But also there are people that are like, he's nothing but a fourth outfielder, which is like, okay, then we haven't been paying attention to baseball. Like there's a natural middle ground. Things mostly shift to the middle ground in like every projection out there, right? There's a few extremes, but yeah, I don't know, man. I'm excited to see what he does, but yeah, just let's take it one day at a time and throw out terrible baseball cliches.
I think too that it's so important that where he's at in his development as a player, it's really, really important to take into account the like mental hurdles that he's going to have to get over at the plate. I'm specifically like referring to his like plate approach. And last year we saw a very like interesting development path just in one season in terms of like his plate approach, right? Where he limited the strikeouts a decent amount, but as the season wore on, especially by the time he got up to high A South Bend, he was not drawing hardly any walks, which is something that he was doing fairly well in Myrtle Beach. And I think that was a very concerted effort. I think he went on and spoke with Lance Borozdowski on Marquee about like that was very intentional for him to be drawing fewer walks and being more aggressive at the plate. But that doesn't mean that's how he's going to be for the entire part of it, like his entire career. I don't even think that's how he's going to be next year in 2023. Like I think that he was tinkering with things, and that's what players do. That's what players do throughout their entire careers, but especially prospects, to figure out what is right, to work on specific ways in which you go about hitting. So I mentioned that because I think that it's important that he picks the brain of hitters in the big leagues. He's now got several long tenured Major League Baseball players in spring training with the Cubs, especially after they've signed Dansby Swanson and Trey Mancini and Eric Hosmer. Like or dislike the Eric Hosmer signing, he's been in the big leagues a long time. It can't hurt for PCA to pick the brain of Eric Hosmer and his plate approach. You know what I mean? And so I think that's
the guy's
really
a World Series winner. Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see how he picks the brains of these long tenured big league players and how he incorporates that to what he's doing in Double-A Tennessee this year, because that's going to be huge as a part of his development. We know he's super talented, obviously. Like we know that he's got that. It's just a matter of like, who is he as a hitter? Is he going to be, will he have to have a high batting average in order for his on-base percentage to be propped up? Or will he walk enough that like he can bat 260 or so and still get a good on-base percentage? You know what I mean? And part of that is how legit is the pop that he showed at the plate in terms of power. Because I don't think he's going to be a 30 home run hitter in the big leagues. I think putting that expectation on him is ridiculous. But he can be maybe a 10 to 20 home run guy if that on-base percentage stays up. So it's just like, who is he as a player? That's what I'm excited to see in 2023 from PCA. And I think this big league invite can be huge for that development.
I agree. I think it's really good. You mentioned kind of being around guys who have hit, who've gone through different hitting adjustments and stuff like that. Ian Happ's another really good example. I brought him up earlier for the defense, but like, Ian Happ is constantly changing the type of hitter he is. And through this time, again, progress isn't linear, right? Hashtag Theo Epstein. But like Ian Happ has gotten better and better because he's had to keep constantly adjusting the way he hits. I don't hope that PCA does that, but like what you're saying, trying to find the hitter you are. Sometimes fans send us stuff that, and hey, like we love statistics. Statistics are awesome. For anybody who doesn't follow this part of the site on Northside Bound, Greg Huss does an amazing job keeping track of statistics, stats you actually can't find anywhere else, as far as I know, for some of these minor leaguers. Very, very cool stuff that he does. Stats are great, but also we have to factor in the fact that like sometimes these pitchers are given very specific development plans, and it's for the next couple games, the next few weeks. We want you to be constantly swinging at this type of pitch. We don't care what you do with it. We want to prove, like, that slider isn't a good pitch that we want you to handle, but we want you to be able to, that in crunch time, in battle situations, we want you to try to hit it just to prove it.
I think we associate that part of development with pitchers,
yes,
like a lot. We talked about that on a recent episode of Cubs on Deck with Jordan Wicks, and we talked about how he felt a little more confident in his changeup early in the year and not as confident in his other breaking balls. And so he kind of ditched the changeup that he felt more confident in and focused on getting outs with his slider, getting outs with his curveball, getting outs with a new cutter. And then he reincorporated that changeup back in the mix because he felt so confident. He felt like he didn't need to use it as much. That feels more common that we talk about that part of pitching development, working on specific pitches. We see it every single year in spring training, every single year with current big leaguers, where like Kyle Hendricks he's really working on his curveball today, and like the first 8 pitches he throws of the outing is a curveball. It's like obviously he's not going to do that in a regular season game, but we talk about that with pitchers a lot. But that happens with hitters. We see that in spring training with big leaguers. You see that in the minor leagues with prospects all the time. That like, okay, I'm going to spit on every single slider that gets thrown my way, so I can work on really making contact with high fastballs, whatever it might be, you know. And I think that it might have been more apparent in PCA last year than any other player I remember. And I mean, I know it happens with every single player every single year. But I can't remember like watching and thinking, like this is exactly what he's doing. He's working on being way more aggressive and hitting early in cuts. I guess I kind of associate with Kevin Madej, who did that in 2021. That was different though. Like he was kind of showcasing the fact that he had that hit tool, and then in 2022 he really backed off that and was very, very patient at the plate. Considering where he was at, I wouldn't consider him very patient at the plate, but like more than he was in 2021. And so that's another example of like a guy specifically working on that part of his game. I think that Chase Strumpf might be another example of that, where he really worked on kind of tapping into that power a little bit more. And we saw him become that 3 true outcome guy when he was a contact-oriented guy when he got drafted. So that's why I think that some of us are so high on Chase Strumpf, because maybe he can take both of those worlds, right? That contact approach that he had early in his career, that power that he tapped into by a very concerted effort recently, and then combine that, and now he's like a complete hitter. So like that's just that part of like player development is so interesting to me. I love that.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. I was trying to think of another example of somebody, but the ones you mentioned, I think were the only ones that I can really think of that stood out from the hitter side, right? Because the pitchers, and I know you've probably been in conversations, or I know you have. I think we've been in the same conversations with players sometimes, where on the pitching side, they'll say, like, we've had people that are like, yeah, I literally was told I could not throw a fastball in this at all. And then I did one time and I got chewed out for it because they knew I could win without it. So it was just something where, if I had to pick somebody that I think is going to do a very similar process to PCA next year, I think it's going to be James Triantos in South Bend. I think he's going to come into the year with a very, very specific development plan that is stop chasing these pitches. If you get called out on the outside corner of a pitch that you were already just going to ground out on, we literally don't care, but stop swinging at those pitches. Wait for your pitch to drive. And I think that's going to be the development plan that's going to be very, very similar to PCA. Both those guys came out of the draft with really, really big hit tools, a lot of contact. And the questions around him was like, okay, how much pop are they going to have? PCA answered a lot of those questions. I think Triantos is going to do the same thing next year. But yeah, I think that's good. One note on Chase Strumpf. Can I jump in there on that?
Yeah, for sure.
I really like you brought that up. But kind of coming back to the Cubs convention and Strumpf, and he's a guy that seems like the Cubs do really feel pretty strong about him. Because kind of piecing a bunch of things together this winter, he was name dropped in The Athletic as a dark horse candidate for a 40-man spot, which is something that usually when like Sahadev Sharma and Patrick Mooney kind of make those little name drops, those are very intentional and very specific. The only one that didn't get a 40-man spot was Strumpf. Everybody else they mentioned did, including Ryan Jensen. So they were like really in on that. We've seen Chase Strumpf involved in a lot of the activities at Wrigley with some of the best prospects that were getting invited there as well. And, a lot of the festivities recently. So I'm wondering, I am very curious about Strumpf. I might be a little bit too low on the guy because it seems like the Cubs do believe in him or have some backers there.
I think now's the perfect time to transition into some that CubsCon prospect panel that they hosted. That if you guys out there listening have not watched, you can go watch on the Cubs YouTube channel. It's about 40 minutes long on the YouTube channel, and it's a very interesting watch. I love getting into that, and I want to transition to that because you mentioned Chase Strumpf with him being at CubsCon, and I'm trying I'm just going off the top of my head right now, but I'm trying to think of they had 20 or so prospects at, maybe not quite 20.
It was just under that, I think. Yeah.
Prospects at CubsCon.
Yep.
And he might have been one of the only players that was Rule 5 eligible this year, not added to the 40-man roster, and was still present at CubsCon.
Yep.
And I'd have to go back and check my work on that, which I won't do right now. But I think he was, and that alone shows the confidence that the Cubs have in him as a prospect. Because that's a very unique position to be in. The fact that he was available to be selected by any club, and he was not, and the Cubs still said, you know what, we're still going to bring you to CubsCon. We still view you as one of our top guys. I think Chase Strumpf was present at that when they brought all the Cubs prospects to Wrigley Field for that I don't even know what they called it, the little camp that they had with them to get them familiar with Wrigley and that atmosphere. Which real quick side tangent. I've heard a lot of people say that's so original, that's so new. I thought I remember the Cubs doing that a few years ago with other prospects before this new rebuild. Am I imagining?
No, they have. There
Okay.
wasn't any guys, I'm pretty sure, and
Yeah.
so it's very much. So I think there's a few different iterations of this that I remember, but one of them is that they would kind of invite a couple other people, and then alongside that do the minor league player of the year, minor league pitch of the year, etc. But yeah, they've had a few guys out playing catch on the field. It's not super original. I think it's bigger.
I remember it was an off season several years ago where they had guys basically just get them familiar with doing an interview in the big leagues and what it feels like to be in the clubhouse, and I for some reason it reminds me of it was the Trey Masick and Tyler Scalina, that draft class, that era of guys. I just name dropped. That's a couple name drops that you weren't expecting.
Oh man, yeah.
Anyways, that was a 10. I was not expecting to drop Tyler Scalina on this podcast episode, but moral of the story is that the CubsCon prospect panel was really was awesome. I mean, I think that one of my biggest takeaways. So basically, they had Lance Brozdowski, aforementioned, and Elise Miniker up on stage asking questions to kind of each and every one of the guys, and then allowed fans to come up to the mics, obviously it's Cubs convention, and ask some questions to the whole group or players specifically. And one of my biggest takeaways of the entire CubsCon, or the entire panel, was PCA and the way he handled himself. I know we let out this episode with a lot of PCA talk. I'm going to keep it going a little bit. Just the way he answered questions, the calmness that he had, the fun answers that he provided, he felt like a big leaguer up on stage. In addition to we know he's talented, but it just felt like he was kind of taking charge in terms of when there were a lot of questions posed by fans that was hey, this is for anybody. And PCA a lot of times was the guy who stepped up and provided that answer, which was interesting because he's one of the youngest guys on stage, really. And he was still stepping up. And that from an outside baseball talent perspective was awesome to see.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's funny because we talk about PCA leading off this podcast and pretty much leading off a lot of the CubsCon prospect talk, and we view him as a future leadoff hitter. So it figures he's got a lot of moxie, a lot of competitiveness, and he played on the national stage a lot as a kid. So really not surprising coming from Harvard Westlake. They've had a lot of big leaguers too. And his parents are even in the acting community as well. So it is really interesting, but he held himself extremely well. I thought he answered his questions extremely. I thought he was great up there. Really, the whole thing was awesome.
Yeah, I think that having, especially having, Elise was great. Having Lance up on stage and his connection with those players was very, very apparent. Ryan Jensen answered a few questions, and you can see the personality that Ryan Jensen brings into the clubhouse every single day by the way he was answering different questions. I mean, I think that he is. We talk about the camaraderie between the different prospects in the system and how the Cubs go after and sign and draft guys that are like high quality human beings in addition to being good baseball players. And like you see that when Ryan Jensen and Brendan Davis and Cam Sanders and Cole Roeder and Levi Jordan, like these guys are so close knit and so tight, and they have this way of communicating with each other. I think Ryan Jensen kind of showed that. There were a lot of like, you could tell there were inside jokes, just like he wanted to bring them out, but like obviously it doesn't make sense in front of a panel of fans. But like that personality that Ryan Jensen had, and I think that'll be interesting and fun to watch once he makes it to the big leagues. Brendan Davis is another guy that like is in that kind of group of buddies that hang out, and Brendan Davis is just like, he is such a pro, dude. Like he is such a pro when he answers questions. I think that Brendan Davis is going to be a fan favorite. PCA is going to be a fan favorite for people once he makes the bigs, for a different reason. Then Brendan Davis is also going to be a fan favorite, and just like the way he carries himself, very like Chris Bryant, like almost in the way that he like conducts interviews and carries himself.
Yeah, really quiet leader. Yeah, I mean, we've always had great relationships with Brennan, and you know, we're big believers in his talent. It was exciting too to talk about how he mentioned to reporters that he's like, I'm ready to go. I'm feeling good. Obviously, you know, you have to be careful with putting too much kind of hype behind that, right? Like you want to see him get out there and play, but you know, big season. We don't want to lose track of Brendan Davis out there, and the effect he can have. I mean, you mentioned a few of these guys, right? Like Ryan Jensen, Brendan Davis, obviously PCA. We haven't even talked about Canario, who was moving around pretty well, man. That was good to see. And I think also a really, really strong show of support that Alexander Canario was there. I think that's really, really good. They could have absolutely kind of hit him back and say, hey, like, we don't want to put you in the spotlight too much. Keep recuperating, keep resting. I think that was a really, really strong show. But, you know, those few guys, 2023 contributors, completely on the table. Completely on the table.
Yeah, I think that panel was filled with guys that can be up in the bed. And I tweeted out from my out of the vines a few weeks ago of like guys that I forget how I phrased it. I would not be surprised if they debuted in 2023. Yeah. And the list was extensive. Like I basically just had I have a spreadsheet, shocker, with all the organizational roster on it. And I was going down the list, right? I was looking at guys that would, if you told me at the end of 2023, oh, this guy debuted, would it surprise you? And it's like, there were a lot of guys that know. I mean, and some top guys, some middle guys. We saw, I think in 2022, we saw prospects debut in Chicago that are really quality role guys. I think that Christopher Morel, while I don't expect him to be a superstar, I think he has a solidified, like I think he plays a very important role on a World Series winning team. I know that the Ben Zobrist comps are out there, and I don't want to put that expectation on him, but like that role, right? And then Jeremiah Estrada debuted, right? And I think Jeremiah Estrada is a potential high leverage reliever. He's not a starting pitcher that's going to go out there and get you 180 innings and compete for a Cy Young, but like there's importance in having a high leverage reliever. I mean, we saw him debut last year. Hayden Wesneski. Some people are saying he's a 1. Some people are saying he's a 5. Some people are saying he's a long reliever. I don't know, but I do know that he has a good like role on this team as they start to compete for the World Series. I don't think there were superstars that debuted in 2022, but I think we get more of those role type players. I think we get more of the Ryan Jensens, the Riley Thompson, the Chase Strumps, like those type of guys that can carve out roles. But then we also begin in 2023 to see Brendan Davis, who's a potential star, PCA, who's a potential star. Like we see those guys, and then followed up behind that is Kevin Alcantara and other role guys. You know what I mean? Like it's fun. It's a fun. I've been kind of shouting for this. I know that when the Cubs started selling off, they traded away Baez and Rizzo and Brian and all the core. I started going. People started asking me on podcasts as guests because like they wanted to talk prospects. Like they're major league shows, but they wanted to talk prospects because that's what was left. And I remember like I continued like over and over and over and over again to pound the drums, beat the drum that this rebuild is different than the last rebuild in the way that they're compiling players, the way they expect players to debut in Chicago, where it's not 6 guys debuting over the course of 2 years. It is every year you get 3 role players and maybe a stud. And that development track is like, that's the LA Dodgers way. And that's something that I want to mimic. And I don't know how we got on this all the way to this topic, but I feel as passionately now about that method of developing players and debuting players as I did back 3 years or 2 years ago now, you know?
Yeah, it's 100%. So, I mean, I'm with you on that. That isn't to say that this strategy is necessarily better, right? Because the Cubs won the World Series in 2016. Like, that is awesome. And they were a 97-win club in 2015, which is unbelievable. To be fair, they got God-tier Jake Arrieta. But, like, outside of that, still, they were incredible. So, like, but the difference is that Jed Hoyer has talked so much, and even Theo Epstein before that, about having as many bites of the apple as you can get. And the Dodgers have done that for a decade. The Cubs, this is like the Dodgers have slow played like a whole bunch of poker hands with knowing the fact that they can also splurge out and go get Mookie Betts. And at some point, the Cubs are going to need to like put some chips in. But they put like a few chips in. They're playing most hands, and they're seeing if they can win. What the Cubs did is effectively push all their chips in, and they're like, this is us. We are going all in on these. And everything worked, and they won, and flags fly forever.
Mm-hmm.
This time, they're doing exactly what you're saying. They're saying, like, okay, this year, we talked about this, and this is going to get a whole bunch of flack, too. I think we should talk about Matt Mervis. I don't see that on the show notes, but I think we should talk about Matt Mervis. But, like, as a maybe transition to this, there was so much about the Eric Hosmer, Trey Mancini, and we're a prospect podcast. We're going to talk about prospects. But in relation to prospects, effectively what the Cubs were doing is setting up the fact that either Matt Mervis mashes in the bigs this year, or they don't win at all. And that is just not the situation you want to put like any prospect in. The Cubs didn't even do that. You know, you don't even want to do that with like Chris Bryant in 2015, right? Like, and he did, and it worked out. But like, that's a really tough position to put in. So the way they're building, how you're describing, I'm all about it, where it's like, these guys are going to come up. They're going to force the issue. The Atlanta Braves did that last year. Michael Harris was not ready to go to be the center fielder. They signed Adam Duvall. And then guess what? Michael Harris just went super mode. And like, he destroyed it. He forced the issue and he earned the playing time, but he's not, he wasn't set up to fail. And so I very much like the fact that bring in this depth, bring in, these couple cracks at like, hey, this guy could be a stud. This guy could be a stud. This guy could be a stud. And you look at 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, it's not like everything comes up in 2024. It either works or it doesn't.
The Cubs in 2016 saw the best possible result of the way they developed players, and that's a World Series championship. The worst result, or a bad result, and far more likely result, is what the Chicago White Sox have been doing. They built a farm system for everybody to debut over the course of 2-ish years, and it has failed. And I think that's way more likely. You look at the Dodgers situation, they won one title in that 2020 weird wonky title that even if you don't want to count it, like, okay, don't count the title, fine, whatever. But the point is that like, I think that the Dodgers, the way as good as they've done, I think they have seen a bad possible outcome in the fact that they only have one World Series title, and we're still talking about them as being terrific. I think anything other than the worst case scenario, you have the Dodgers have won multiple titles because the way they've assembled this team, and they win 105 games every single year, and like, so as wonky as it is, they've had the bad scenario in that development process with the Dodgers is only winning one title. So I'm more willing to bank and bet on the development of prospects in multiple years at a time, and the way the Cubs have done this. So I don't know. I'm glad that you brought up Matt Mervis and how important that is to not have to rely on a prospect. You bring him up as soon as he's ready.
Absolutely.
As soon as a pitcher is ready to contribute at the big league level, you call him up. We've seen that with Justin Steele and Keegan Thompson. We saw that with Hayden Wesneski. We might see that with Jordan Wicks. Like as soon as they're ready to get out to the big league level, you bring them up and you find a way to make that work. And you just can't like rely on a prospect, especially a non-top 100 guy. We can argue that he's a top 100 guy or not, but like a non-top 100 guy to produce 30 home runs and a 850 OPS. So it's just not fair, you know. But you bringing up Owen Casey kind of transitions us into the next topic here. Is we've gotten some word about a few different Cubs prospects being on initial rosters for the World Baseball Classic, which is so. I mean, I love the World Baseball Classic is like so much fun, and so we've seen the news that Owen Casey is on Canada's initial World Baseball Classic roster. So we got Owen on Canada, Matt Mervis on Israel, Miguel Amaya on Panama, and Javier Assad on Team Mexico, which is awesome. So I think that Owen Casey is probably the one that stands out the most of that group. Miguel Amaya, Javier Assad, and Matt Mervis, all older dudes, obviously. And I think that Team Canada is obviously a team that is more competitive a lot of times than maybe, honestly, though, all the other teams are pretty competitive. But we see some good talent coming from the Canada portal, and Owen Casey's 20 years old. So that was just fun to see him on a part of that initial roster.
I think that's just so cool. I mean, we talked about PCA kind of being in big league camp and being able to pick, hitters' brains and whatever. Owen Casey can do the same thing in Team Canada and see professional at bats. And I don't know how much he's going to play or even if he's going to make the final roster, but being around that team, being around professional, big league hitters at times is such a good experience for these guys. It's effectively letting him play like AAA ball. I'm not saying Team Canada's AAA caliber. I'm saying like the amount of like guys who are consistently up and down to big leagues or are big league players where, it's a really high caliber of pitcher that he's going to be facing in that camp. It's going to be awesome. I think it's really, really good. We saw transformative changes in Owen Casey, really terrible, like first month and a couple days. And there have been good stories about that. I think The Athletic had one, just how he was able to take a total reset and then was a stud the rest of the way. And it's really very cool to let him get exposed to this advanced pitching, consistently keep challenging him in an environment where it's completely fine to not be a masher, and just allow him to grow. So I'm very excited to see Owen Casey and, WBC and a few of these other guys kind of get some good cracks and stuff.
Yeah, and seeing that Miguel Amaya is ready to play in a tournament like the WBC, where the health has been a concern over the last 2+ years with Miguel Amaya. So to see that he's ready to play for a team outside of the Cubs organization this quickly is exciting. I think that I can take nothing but positive vibes away from Miguel Amaya playing for Panama, and Javier Assad playing for Mexico is fun too. I don't want to gloss over Javier Assad playing for Mexico because there's a lot of just uber talented guys playing for Team Mexico. And Javier Assad, at this point, he gets lost in the mix of conversations where he's still a prospect and not exactly. I don't expect him to start the year in 2023 in the big leagues. He'll probably be in the AAA rotation likely. So you don't have the big league media talking about Javier Assad because he's not quite really there, but he also has debuted. So we have like people like us that aren't really like referring to him as a prospect all that much for two reasons, I guess. One is because he was never a top prospect, and two, because he's already made his MLB debut, and it's like, all right, like he's a prospect technically, but he has big league experience. And so like I feel like guys like Javier Assad get glossed over a lot in conversations. But it's guys like that it makes it so much more exciting when he actually does contribute at the big league level. I'm not saying that he will necessarily. He has a very like thin margin for error, I think, in the way that he pitches. But regardless, for him to be on this Team Mexico at this point is fun and awesome, and another reason that we get to talk about him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guilty of glossing over Javier Assad too. I get lots of questions about like big leaguers and depth and starters. And then I have to remember like Javier Assad had a really, really good year last year. Guy had, I mean, we don't want to put too much stock into ERA, but like he had like a 3 ERA in the big leagues. He started 8 or 9 games. I agree with you. I think he's got a very thin margin for error, but this showcase or this World Baseball Classic kind of allows him to showcase his stuff. Like maybe he doesn't make the Cubs camp, but it might also be an opportunity where the Cubs kind of play with their depth and say, hey, look, our guys are actually doing well. Kyle Hendricks is on a good track, maybe not make opening day, but we don't need to worry about as many, emergency starters. Javier Assad's doing really well. And another team looks at it and says, yes, like, hey, we are willing to provide this third baseman for you or whatever. Like there's really good opportunities for the player, Javier Assad, along with some of these other guys. So I'm excited to see it. Frankly, the World Baseball Classic is just fun as hell. Like it just is. There have been so many cool moments. I'm thinking of the Adam Jones catch. I'm thinking of like the Javi Baez, like no look tag and point to Yachty. And like, there's just so many good moments in the World Baseball Classic that to see some of these prospects hopefully get this opportunity to experience that and experience that atmosphere. It might make going to the minor leagues a little bit challenging when all of a sudden, no knock, Cubs draw extremely well, passionate fans, Iowa, Myrtle Beach, Tennessee, South Bend, Arizona even. But like, if you go from playing in front of tens of thousands to minor leagues, a bit of an adjustment. But yeah, I'm just excited to see these guys get a very cool opportunity that only comes around once every few years.
And not only tens of thousands of people in the stands, but like they're on the world stage in terms of like people watching on TV too, and so
100%.
we get it feels like as fans who follow these guys, follow Mervis and Assad and Miguel Amaya and Owen Casey, like we're always like hyping them up. We're always talking about it. It's like, oh, like you should pay attention to Owen Casey and like Matt Mervis. It's like, oh, Matt Mervis is going to be playing first base for Team Israel in the World Baseball Classic on my TV. And like a lot of people will be tuned in just because of how big of a deal the World Baseball Classic is. And so like you get to like put your name more in mainstream a little bit more too. You know what I mean? So I love that aspect. I love that for these players. I think that's so much fun in addition to like representing your country,
Yeah, it's kind of like how the Olympics, used to be and everything. And so like they're playing for their country. I think piggyback off of exactly what you said. I just want to emphasize it. Like that is just a really cool experience. And when some of these guys, especially from other countries, go back, like this is a life-changing event. So yes, everybody wants to play in the big leagues. Everybody wants that experience. Of course, it's their dream. But like to be able to play where the name of your country is on the front of your jersey is a very cool experience, and players have mentioned that. And so like, yeah, I'm just excited. I hope we even hear a few more names kind of trickle out as alternates or people in camp, kind of like Owen Casey is. And yeah, it's very, very cool.
Going from one international flavor of the World Baseball Classic to another international flavor of the international free agent market, which is what the Cubs were playing in this past weekend, the weekend of the 14th and 15th. The Cubs made some big signings, and the international free agent market is always a very interesting thing to follow because teams are out here literally signing 16. There's more 16-year-olds signed than 20-plus-year-olds signed, and that makes for as much of a crapshoot as the MLB draft is. The international free agent market is that times a million. And so I like to get excited about as I do with all prospects, I like to get excited about the new guys in the system, the new guys I get to follow, the optimism with these players, while also bringing it back down to earth a little bit and like looking at all the list of international free agent signings over the past however many years and saying, well, the hit rate on these guys, not the contact rate, like the getting guys that are successful is really small, honestly. And so I want to like congratulate these guys and hype them up and get excited while also like not getting crazy excited. You know what I mean? As a fan. So I want to highlight a few guys here that the Cubs did sign in the international free agent market, and then I'll kick it over to you for your thoughts on the whole process in general, and then anything on these players. I want to highlight three guys, I think, mostly because these are the big spender, the big guys who get the big signing bonus, I guess. And I apologize in advance for the pronunciation of these names. I'm excited to get some more information and watch them play and hear their names said out loud so that I can get more familiar. So I apologize. But the Cubs signed three shortstops. Are these three guys? They are Dernici Valdez, who's a shortstop who signed for 2.7 million out of I don't have it down. I think he was Venezuela. Dernici Valdez. I don't have that written down here. I apologize. They also signed Ludwig Espinoza for 1.5 million, and they signed Angel Cepeda for $1 million. And I guess I'll kick it to you for those three guys. What are your thoughts on the whole process in general, I guess?
Yeah, so Valdez, I'm pretty sure, is the Dominican Republic. Espinoza was the Venezuelan. They had a really, really good class in the DR, Dominican Republic. So like Valdez, Cepeda. They actually signed a few more shortstops too.
Yes.
There was a Pascual and a Ferrara. We'll get to them, of course. But obviously, the big three are the multi-million-dollar guy, or at least $1 million guys. And that's Valdez, Espinosa, and Cepeda, like you talked about. And yeah, I mean, so this is a bit of a volume approach. It's kind of a middle ground. Again, like we were talking about, like the middle can be good. And there are, in this class, there were a couple like super hyped top prospects who commanded nearly their team's entire bonus. So Ethan Salas was a catcher with the Padres, and he took up like almost their entire bonus that they have. They can offer very, very little to everybody else. That's putting all your eggs in one basket. He could be amazing. The Cubs spread it around to a few teams or a few guys, whereas like some teams barely offered even like 1 million out of it. And so they still even have half. The Baltimore Orioles, I believe, are a team that signed a whole bunch of guys, but actually still have half of their bonus pool. I might be confusing that to a different team, but Valdez, Espinosa, and Cepeda have different skills. A question I got this weekend was, why all these shortstops? Like they have Christian Hernandez, they have like all these other guys. You can almost never go wrong picking shortstops. If we think about this, like these guys are all 16. And if you think about the players that played on like your high school team, or even the guys that are playing first base in the majors, a whole bunch of them were playing shortstop.
Even in the minors. Some of the guys in the majors are playing shortstop in the minors. Yeah.
100%. That's just like the athletic place, right? Like shortstops, center fielders, catchers, pitchers. That's pretty much where you want to be doing. Now, a few of them have already looked like third baseman. Okay, well, those are probably first basemen in the future. But we saw Heimer Candelario was drafted or signed, I think, technically as a shortstop. And now he's third base, but even may transition to first base with the Nationals. So, like, that's just kind of where they are. Valdez, Espinosa, and Cepeda are really strong. I want to note one thing about the bonuses. So the bonuses are high, and they're different between the two. That doesn't mean that that's how they necessarily should be ranked. We have to just talk honestly here about the international free agent process, which is these deals were basically agreed upon a couple years ago. It's not a great process. It's not great. I'm not going to talk about the morality of the situation. Frankly, it should be changed. I'm hoping that eventually the union and baseball can come together and agree on a very player-forward process, or as player-forward as it can possibly be. It's not great right now, but these deals were agreed upon a couple years ago by basically every club. This isn't saying like, I can't believe the Cubs did this. Every team does this. They follow the rules as best they can, as best as they will. Some teams bypass that pretty badly. The Atlanta Braves did that a few years ago. I think it was about 5 years ago, and that caught their GM technically banned for life, although he recently got brought back. So 5 years, 5 years to life.
5 years from, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. 5 years to life, but on good behavior, apparently 5 years. And it's just a messy process. I will say that the feedback that I've gotten, I'm not super in tune with the pro level stuff out there. The feedback I've gotten was Angel Cepeda was a massive get. Like there is at least one NL West team that we may hypothetically have talked about earlier that was like really big in on him and really wanted him, and the Cubs got him. And so he's the guy that the feedback I've gotten was like really, really strong. That's not saying anything about Valdez or Espinosa, or that anything negative about them at all. Just that Angel Cepeda was like a really, really good get. And so I personally am very excited about that.
Yeah, Cepeda is actually the guy that piqued my interest the most of this whole bunch as well. When you talk about like signing shortstops, and it's just because of the freak athletes at 16 years old. I read, I think it might have been in Baseball America. It was somewhere that they hinted at like maybe Cepeda ends up like he's a good candidate to work behind the plate. And it's like, I mean, we signed Brian Altuve a few years ago. I think we signed him as a catcher. It's like, is he actually a catcher? Is he a second baseman? Is he an outfielder? Like the positions are, while they're not entirely worthless to look at the positions, it's to a certain degree they are, because you brought it like they're high school, like not only high school, like sophomore, like junior and high school age. Ian Happ talked about on the Compound podcast quite a bit how he was a shortstop growing up, and he was like that was who he was a shortstop, and like Ian Happ does not play shortstop in the major leagues. Like even when he came up to the sit, like he was not even a shortstop in college. So yeah, just don't put too much stock in like the thing you could probably put the most stock in is what you mentioned with like if a guy is signed as a third baseman, he might be a first baseman long term. That actually might be the thing I'm most confident in are left-handed outfielders and guys signed as third baseman to become first baseman, because typically the shortstops become third baseman or second baseman or center fielders or left fielders or first baseman. So yeah, that's something I look out for. But Cepeda was a guy. He spent some time in the state. He grew up in the States before going back down to the Dominican, and he was kind of viewed by scouts at the time as a draft pick type guy, as a top 10 round draft if it would have been out of high school, and that's a no joke type prospect. So again, not paying attention to the signing bonuses quite as much here, but the fact that they got Cepeda in this international class is super, super exciting.
Yeah, he's a really good get. He's a fun get. When we talk about the process a little bit too, I think just to put some context, because I think you illustrated this very well compared to the draft. And at the draft, we still feel like high school is a bit of a crapshoot, and we're taking these guys at like 17, 18, 19. But this isn't even just signing him at 16. This is effectively agreeing to a deal at 14.
Yeah.
So I'll use the example of Caden Grice is a guy who is now playing for Clemson. And a couple of years ago, when we were talking about what the 2023 draft class is looking like, people were like, he's a 1-1 guy. He's just an absolute stud, an absolute monster. He might rank in the top 300, 350 now. I think Prospects Live has him somewhere in the top 300. I'd probably have him a little bit low. The contact rate scares me. Not to dive too deep in that, but like that's an example of how that's a super crapshoot. And this guy is several years older. Like development is so non-linear. And so, with these guys, you want to get some volume there because you just never really know what's going to happen. And I think you need to be a little bit flexible in how you view them. So yeah, they loaded up on shortstops. They've got now like 8 or 9 guys that Baseball America has, including somebody from Brazil, which I think is awesome. And maybe we'll get into the other guys here pretty soon. But that's super, super cool. I really want to dive into that. I only just saw that stuff a little bit ago. And I think they're going to be consistently pulling in a few more names. We might hear them on Baseball America. We might honestly just start to hear them when the one and only Arizona Phil is kind of giving us, all the info down there in Mesa. That sometimes that's honestly how we find out that they've signed guys, and Phil is unbeatable. Basically, no one has beaten Phil to some of that stuff. So it's an interesting group because they've obviously invested in the shortstops at the top. And one question that we do get a lot, I don't know, Greg, if you've gotten it, I know Todd's gotten it, I've gotten it, is what about Fernando Cruz? That is one of those guys that is viewed as this like one of the best to come along every few years kind of a group. He was never really, according to Fangraphs, like considered in this class. He's going to be next year if there's no international free agency, and obviously if there's no kind of snags or anything like that. So expect Fernando Cruz hopefully next year, but he was never really in play for this year.
Yeah. I do want to hit on Emmanuel Madeira, who was the right-handed pitcher signed out of Brazil, which I don't have a whole lot of information on his talents at all, but I just want to point him out because like that's an interesting case signing a guy out of Brazil. You don't hear that very often at all. And the Cubs have kind of made it's been fun. The Cubs have done this over the past few years, signing guys out of countries that are not exactly baseball factories. And and Madeira out of Brazil is just another example of that.
It's a really good point. I mean, you never really know what's going to happen, right? I mean, sometimes you just catch lightning in a bottle. Brazil's had a few guys taken. I think the Blue Jays just recently signed somebody that was fairly big down there too. And like, it's not a baseball factory, but then again, you kind of see what you can get when you take somebody which is raw natural talent and you drop them into a pro development system, and sometimes just everything clicks. But yeah, I'm excited. I just saw that kind of pop up, so I can't say that I'm super down on that either. I'm really looking forward to digging in, but I'm excited. I'm very excited.
I do want to kick it to you for any other tidbits that you want to include as far as international free agent signings go. I have nothing else to really add, but I'll give you the floor if there's anything.
Yeah, there's not too much other than just I think there's a couple pitchers that we're going to be digging in on a little bit. One is Miguel Cruz, and if you've seen some pictures of him, he's a big guy. So it'll be very interesting to see once we get a little bit more information on stuff and what the Cubs kind of do from a physical development standpoint. I think that'll be very exciting. And then Emmanuel Madeira as well is also somebody we're going to be digging into. So mostly position players. Pitchers are the group that sometimes we get feedback on this. We're just like, why didn't the Cubs, invest in like this one top international free agent pitcher? I got to admit, the Houston Astros have perfected that. They really don't sign the big guys. They get, I think it's Christian Javier down there was like a $10,000 signing, and they just took his development to the peak. And now he's striking out fools in the World Series. Like, that's the kind of level, that's what you want to do, like a ton of volume down there. And just like we've talked about, Craig Breslow, Casey Jacobson, all that, Tony Kugali staff in the minor leagues and what they can do. That's kind of where you just want to get a whole bunch of depth and just see who pops.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good strategy, especially given the confidence that we have in this pitching development crew. All right, I want to transition here because we still have some time from the international free agent market, which probably should be a draft, but again, we won't get into that, to a draft that currently does exist, and that's the amateur draft that happens every year. You are the expert here when it comes to MLB draft stuff. Over on Northside Bound, writing about it, having mock drafts, having top lists, all that good stuff. I kind of come at the draft stuff. I'll be the first to admit on this show, I kind of come at the draft stuff from a much bigger like fans perspective, where I'm not digging in nearly as deep. I kind of identify certain guys that I like here and there for different rounds, but I'm not diving real deep. So this is an opportunity on the show, and you'll see this this episode and throughout until it happens, and then we'll kick it up back again for the 2024 draft, all that good stuff. But I will be kind of asking questions that either fans have and then send into the show, or that I have from their perspective, because I want to learn more about the draft and the Cubs options in each year's draft class. So I know you wanted to talk a little bit about draft stuff, and I will swing it to you for that.
I'm more just like a quick primer that, hey, that a lot of this content's going to be coming out here. The season hasn't started, depending on when this releases, but I would imagine we're going to be out before like mid-February. Yeah. I hope so. So I mean, this is a preseason. My first mock draft is going to be coming out here very soon. It may already be out by the time this drops. I can't quite tell. It'll be somewhere right around here. And the Cubs are picking 13th. They don't have a second round pick, but they do have a comp pick for Wilson Contreras. And this is another really good opportunity for the group. Dan Kandrovitz was on with at CubsCon. Got to ask some questions too, a little bit about strategy. And this is another opportunity for the Cubs to take some big leaps on different areas. I don't think that they will just triple down on pitchers, kind of like they did last year. I really do think they're going to spread it out a little bit and just let individual players kind of dictate things. But there are some players that are really, really piquing my interest. And I suppose we can just kind of toss out a few names as we go along. Bryce Eldridge is a player from James Madison High School out of Virginia, which, if that sounds familiar, it's actually James Triantos' alma mater. They played on the same team, which was a lot of power back then. Bryce Eldridge he actually is a pitcher and a hitter. And I got to admit, when I ask around to teams and evaluators, I get a little bit more of a push. And I mean, I personally feel this way, like probably a pitcher, but they're like, honestly, we're split. Ask us in July and we may not have an answer either. So I don't think people know yet. He's 6'7". I look at that projection. I'm like, man, this guy could be a future frontline starter if everything clicks. And then I see him just hit absolute bombs. And so it is really hard for teams to kind of figure out. But like Bryce Eldridge is a name that I think we're going to be hearing a lot about. Trying to think of a few other guys I really, really want to highlight here. Do you have anybody that you want to ask?
Yeah, well, I guess I want to ask about Eldridge a little bit. And is he a guy that you view as being still available at 13? Is it at this point in the process, obviously to January, is that something that, because the Cubs drafted James Triantos, they obviously scouted his high school very hard, that maybe they may be a little bit higher on Eldridge than other teams, that maybe, I know that they don't have those picks down a little bit further, but if they need to pull the trigger on Eldridge and they really want him, is that first round at pick number 13 the way that they're going to have to go to get Eldridge?
I don't know that we could say that yet. And so the reason is that if teams really think he's a prep pitchers usually just fall in the draft because of risk. And now it seems like every team is like super risk averse. So yeah, there's like a Dylan Lesko that goes at 15. Yeah, there's Brandon Barrera should have been drafted higher. He went down to the Blue Jays. Noah Schultz probably could have been drafted higher. I think he went down to the White Sox. So I think we see prep pitchers fall a little bit. The premier guys still probably go round 1 or 2. So like comp pick probably would be pretty difficult. And he may just get pushed out because of bonus demands. I'm not going to speculate on signability or anything or, like that, but they could have to draft him at 13. If they fall in love with him, the team probably needs to take him somewhere right around there. He, I think, is in play at 13. But I want to say this, like, just looking at what things look like now, because this stuff could take a step back, or he could tell teams, like, I really only want to play for these teams, or get a huge NIL offer, stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I will say that in my upcoming mock draft, Bryce Eldridge was one of the names that I will say this. He was originally mocked there. He was mocked there. I even posted a little bit about him and made a comment because Todd Johnson wrote a really cool piece where he was trying to piece together and guess who I mocked. And that's who I had mocked to the Cubs. And then I was doing all this digging and found another particular player that I thought, you know what? No one in the Cubs sphere is talking about him right now. I really do think he fits actually a lot of what the Cubs model is. And so I really want to highlight him. And so I actually pivoted away from Bryce Eldridge, who went a couple picks later. So like, yes, like I think he's a first round caliber guy. Mm-hmm. And I think a team, if everything shakes right, I think a team takes him in the first round, and he's just super exciting and fun.
So I know that from a more casual draft fan like myself, it's really, I love watching college baseball in the spring. And sitting here in January, we say that college baseball is in the spring, but really it starts in like late winter. So with the college season rapidly approaching and getting to watch plenty of games on ESPN Plus and all the other channels, and then I'm going to be trying to get to some games here in the Midwest if I can. Who are some players that we're going to be able to watch on TV, some college players that might be worth the watch this spring?
Yeah, there's a few. So I think with ESPN Plus, there's a few teams to like really, they seem like all their games are on there. Mm-hmm. One of them is Campbell. So we get to watch a lot of Zach Neto, and I got to be a big fan of Zach Neto last year because he played for Campbell. Roll humps. I think they're the Camels. And there's a pitcher, Cade Cooler, who I really, really like. In fact, I've gone back and forth on whether I would put him as my second best starter. I think he's probably going to be about 3 in the class. Chase Dollander out of Tennessee, and then Hurston Waldrop, and then Cade Cooler. Cade Cooler has really, really ridiculous stuff. He showcased it last year in their playoff run. I think he's really, really good. And that's a guy that you should be able to watch a lot on like ESPN Plus if you want to. From the Big Ten, maybe I'll highlight some of that because I think a lot of our fans are going to be tuning in from the Big Ten. Pay attention to Matt Shaw to Maryland, not a pitcher. He's actually their shortstop, but he's somebody that, and he was also a consideration for the Cubs at 13 in my mock, but he plays with a ton of fire. He's an absolute spark plug. He hits for contact. He hits the ball hard. He plays an up the middle position, kind of questionable whether he ends sliding up to second. Plays for Maryland, so you're going to see him a lot in the Big Ten. And he's definitely somebody to pay attention to there. I'm trying to think about anybody that might be in that same kind of grouping.
The Matt Shaw sounds when you describe him, I get a lot of Nico Horner thoughts with that description.
Very much so. He had a really good Cape Cod League, so I think that's another good one to watch for. And then Jacob Wilson, I kind of forgot. So he's the son of Jack Wilson, formerly Cubs killer Pirates player. Jack Wilson. So I guess use that at your discretion there. But Jacob Wilson was a really good shortstop. He plays for Grand Canyon University. And now his dad is like one of the coaches there as well. And I think Grand Canyon plays a lot of like games that you'll be able to watch as well. He is probably the biggest question mark that I have in the draft because right now he makes really, really strong contact, does not hit the ball hard. Like not even for power, just doesn't hit the ball hard. Mm-hmm. And simply put, if you want to get drafted high, and we're talking high, you need to hit the ball hard. I mean, Jacob Berry is an exception last year. He hit the ball kind of hard and got drafted 6th. But that's like still, he was like a real big aberration there. And he was an SEC performer. So like Jacob Wilson is a guy, though, that like the early comments from the summer from Cape Cod and the U.S. national team was, you know what, he's starting to hit the ball really hard. And so he, if things totally click, he could go anywhere 1-1, or he could slide down in the 20th, 30th, even 40th pick. So he's kind of an interesting one to watch. And I honestly have no idea where he's going to land.
I want to end with, I always like to quiz you on this, and I did not forewarn you. So my apologies if you're not there, especially because it's super, super early in this process, obviously being January. I want to hear about some guy that you really like that's a further down the line draft pick. Like he won't be a first round pick, he won't be a second round pick. Who's somebody that you really dig that's a latter round pick?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Somebody that I just totally dig, but that won't be a first rounder or isn't projected as a first rounder now.
That's however you want to go, but or both. However you want to go about doing it. I'll take it. Here in January, I'll take either answer.
Okay, all right. So maybe let's do both. Let me think about this for a second. So one guy that I think isn't being talked about as a first rounder yet, but that I think is a good chance of ending up there is Johnny Formello. He's actually also a high school player out of Virginia, but things looked really good. Talk about shortstops playing other positions situation in high school. He's a good example. He was playing shortstop in high school, and teams were like, I'm not sure he's a shortstop. He's okay there. Shifted out to center fielder and had like playmaking ability out there. Hits for contact. Shows some really good feel to actually hit the ball on the barrel, which is a good sign, both in telling teams how like making good contact, but also that we can probably drive the ball here in the future as well. I really like him, and I think he's going to get talked about as a first rounder here this spring. So that's my like pick for a first rounder now. And then let me think about this. Let me check my notes here. We'll go.
This is always an opportunity for you to, the predictions and the hype that you drew up for James Triantos a couple of years ago. This is another opportunity for you to hop on that bandwagon soon or early, I guess, so that fans can get super excited and say, "Hey, Greg Zumach told me about this guy months ago."
Yeah, man. Most of the guys, somebody that isn't a first rounder yet. Okay, I don't know how he'll turn out. Ryan Lasko out of Rutgers is a really dang good hitter. Haven't seen him talked about as a first rounder. Apologies if I've missed this because there's kind of like a lot of mock drafts going around. So it's totally possible somebody else saw the same thing, but he does like everything basically well and is a college hitter. He's really, really good at what he does. I think he's definitely somebody that, you know, we're going to look at and say, like, holy cow, how did he not get taken? Another one, I don't know how he's going to turn out. Cooper Pratt. Cooper Pratt does everything. He's kind of in that Jackson Merrill for the Padres and James Toronto's kind of style that, you know, maybe he pops here pretty soon. But Cooper Pratt is another guy, another high school hitter that, like, does everything really well, contact heavy, but, like, you really like his overall approach. And so, yeah, those are my three guys. I'll go Johnny Farmello, who I think maybe pops in the first round. I'll say Ryan Lasko out of college, and Cooper Pratt. I think are guys that I haven't really seen listed as first rounders. Again, apologies if I missed it, but, like, I look at them and say, dang, these guys they should be first round caliber type players.
Dude, I love how I was like, I might be getting you on this, and you're like, let me think about it. And you whip up 3 names. Like, I love it. Is there anybody else that you just want to, like, you feel the need to talk about today before we wrap up the show?
No, I don't think so. I think
right.
3 names is pretty good because there's a few pitchers I really, really like, but my feedback with teams has been like, I'm going to not hype up pitchers right away because they're like, we really want to make sure that people got out of fall healthy.
Yep.
So I'm, and I don't want to jinx anybody. So there's a few pitchers I really like, but I'm going to hold off on that. Maybe a future show on that.
So we got your mock draft coming up soon over at Northside Bound. That's something to absolutely look out for. Is that a one round draft, right?
1 round, yeah. It'll actually be 30 picks because the Mariners just got, like, multiple extra picks at the end of that. But we've got some fun stuff because I really love diving into, like, through the comp round and a little bit beyond, because then we start to actually think about, like, how teams allocate money and usage. So we'll be dropping that later in the springs once the season kind of gets rolling.
Nice. I love it. All right, you got anything else draft or not draft related that you want to hit on before we officially wrap this up?
I don't think so. It's just been a long winter, man. I love talking Cubs prospects, Cub baseball, Cubs draft in general. And it's like, I'm just ready for baseball to be back. The Cubs convention is always that, like, okay, now we're on the home stretch on things. We're like a month or so away from people popping into spring training. Everybody follow on Northside Bound. Rich Beasterfield is going to have some fantastic stuff from Arizona. He's already posting it now. People are out there throwing, and it's just, man, baseball is coming back, and I'm just so excited for it.
Rich is the ideal follow for prospect heads right now. With all the players showing up down in Arizona, he's in there snapping pictures of them. We get to see guys in the best shape of their lives, all that good stuff. So, yeah, be sure to give Rich a follow on Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. So you can see the pictures of those players. And then, yeah, like Zumach said, we will be kind of – right now our schedule is a little wonky. We're reporting at different times throughout the offseason and then posting these episodes. My goal with the posting schedule here for you guys, a peek behind the curtains for fans out there listening, is that I'm just trying to stay consistent with the posting schedule here. So we've been every other week dropping on Tuesday mornings, obviously, up to this point. And I'd like to stay consistent in posting on Tuesday mornings at this point. As we approach into spring training and get some more news to regularly talk about, we'll eventually convert over to every week. And the setup will be maybe a little bit different here, but we're going to go to every week. And that's soon enough. I don't want to flood your feeds with an hour-long episode about nonsense or about nothing. So we're very careful about how we're recording. This will still continue being every other week. You can find me on Twitter at Out of the Vines. You can find Zumach at Ivy Futures. You can find our writing over, like we've mentioned throughout the entirety of this episode, over at northsidebound.com. And really, you can listen to this podcast everywhere where you find podcasts. This episode will be on YouTube. Actually, every episode will be on YouTube. We're trying to grow that following a little bit on the YouTube page. So be sure to subscribe to the YouTube page. Subscribe on all the different podcast feeds if you want them, so that it downloads into your podcast feed for when it's ready. Leave us a review. Leave us a comment. Leave us anything you can possibly do. We'd love to get the word out to as many people as possible. This show is going on, and anyone who's interested in prospects. So we appreciate all your interactions with us. It means the world to us. And in the meantime, we will be back in your ears in 2 short weeks. Thank you guys so much for listening.